Okay everybody, so in this section I would like to show you how to use watercolour. So we're working from our tonal drawing or thumbnail sketches. I've drawn out the one I like the best and I want to add some colour. So I'm showing you that here indoors, but there's no reason why you couldn't take your paints out with you and have a go adding colour to your tonal drawing or doing another one out in the field. But just for this lesson, it's easier if it's all indoors. So what I did here is draw out the rectangle. I divided it up and then I copied this one onto there. And I've just added a first layer of colour to it using the previous tonal drawing as a rough guide. But before we add any more colour to that, I just want to show you a few basics of working with watercolour. Watercolour is a great medium. I think I got my first set when I was about 10 or 11 off my mum and dad, and I loved it. Just a couple of little tips, little housekeeping tips, how to get the best out of it really. So I always have 2 jars of water when I'm working with watercolour, one for cleaning the brush and one to use to mix the colour, so it's always clean. If you don't have clean water or change your water regularly, your colours end up getting a bit muddy and lose the vibrancy. So first things first, this is a Winsor & Newton set with these little half pans. This is just a little piece of natural sponge, but these little pans that you can remove, you can buy replacements, find the colours that work for you and then keep adding them in. So it's kind of similar to what you've got, but the same principle applies. So what I normally do, get my water sorted out, and then to activate the pigment I add a few drops of water to each one of the pans like this, just a wee bit, but it just softens up the top layer and activates the colour. So rather than wetting your brush and scrubbing away at the paint, this just activates it and makes it easier to use. So this little set has got these little fold out mixing areas, little palette-y things. You can use the lid of your tin or a little side plate, that works quite well. So we're just leaving those for a moment to soften up a bit, and then we'll just go on to brushes. This little set comes with a tiny collapsible brush like that, which is great, but it's really small. So if you're just painting exclusively with that, you'd sort of get quite finicky and small. So I use that just as a travel brush, and that goes in there. This is just like a little flask thing that you can put water into when you're going out and painting outside. And then these are my favourite watercolour brushes. So got a flat brush and then 3 different sizes of this sort of rounded brush, all very soft, all natural. And the idea is to wash your brush, swish it about, take the excess off and leave it to dry flat. Last thing you want to do is leave your brushes in the water like that, because what happens is that it damages the fibres of the brush and it starts to rot the wooden handle. And they do, I mean, these have been well used, these are very old actually, so the paint is starting to come off on the handle there, and it loosens, one of them's quite loose, and it will loosen the where it fits in onto the wood there. So if you look after your brushes, you'll get lots of use out of them. So that's just a little tip, just a little housekeeping tip. those to the side. It's always good to have a bit of kitchen roll for blotting, drying things off. You can use it actually on the paper if you put too much water on, just to pull a bit out, and also for cleaning and drying your brushes. Right, so back to this. So I've put a first layer on of quite translucent, quite a lot of mid-tone, but I'm trying to keep hold of this area here as bright white, and this area to stay quite yellowy, and then everything else we just need to add a bit more detail into. It's worth taking photos of your view with your phone camera if it's in your pocket, and then using them for reference, just to sort of keep going back to, but don't be a slave to the photograph, because you're not trying to reproduce a photograph here. You're not going to do as good a job as that. So it's just to help you remember the colours if you weren't able to get them down. Right, I'm going to, let's see, I think I'll start with this, adding a bit more bright yellow. So if you see the paint is now quite soft, and this is my mixing water, and then I'm going to, still got quite a lot of water on the brush, so this will be a thin, bright layer. This brush, this flat brush, is good for lines like that. So I'm pulling that across the page like that. Give it a wash in the first one, dry it off on the paper, and then let's start mixing some more greens. So and it's just layers. That's all you're doing. It's just adding layers, and it builds it up. So you just take your time. If you rush it too much, then you'll end up with a brown mess. And you can see where it pulls in places, so you can keep pulling it to where you want it to be. So I know that the darkest point was underneath this tree, the lower part of this tree, so I'm pulling it over there. I'm going to add a bit of that to that. This was a bit more of a vibrant green in this field, I remember. I'm going to work this one so like I did in my drawing, bringing it down. And then over the back of the hills, add a bit more blue. There's always a bluey tinge in the I know. There was a sort of darker shadow in the hills up there. And then just keep building up the layers like that, and keep mixing your colours. If you're mixing your colours with each other, that creates a bit more of a harmony. So rather than having individual colours, you know, mixed standalone, if you mix a little bit of each other into each of the colours, then there's a greater harmony in your composition. So I'm just going to add a bit of these. So that's the general idea. And work in thin layers, and then you build up the colour as you go. So you see now I'm adding a stronger layer to the roof of this cottage, bringing the colour up, because I know, looking from my tonal drawing, that's one of the darkest areas. Okay, so have a go at that. Remember, the planning helps a great deal, so take your time to sort of draw it out. Use your phone pictures for reference, or if you are doing this outside, just think about it before you start painting, and then it should be successful for you. You can also keep a note of your colours down the side, just for reference, like a little key. And that just, oops, sorry, got my dogs in the background. Shimmers. There we go. So in the next video, I shall show you some of the basics of working with acrylic.